Yes, it's Tuesday, which means it's off my bridge day. I mean, I'm excited for it. I don't know if you're excited for it. I hope you're excited. My name is Guy, and today we are looking at mass fleet battles. I want to be able to have 200 ships fighting against 500 ships. I want to have 100 ships fighting against 30 ships. I want to have all of this stuff going on whilst my PCs are on their little ship going, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff going on. But I also don't want the battle to take 6 months to play out. These are my homebrew rules that are not affiliated with Modiphius in any shape, form, or other way. This is what I have come up with. And the reason for it is I've got a game coming up in June. It's a private commission game, and if you want me to run games for you or your friends, I am available at certain times. Just send me an email, link down below. This game in June, I may or may not want there to be a fleet involved because I think it's fun, it's cool, and it's crazy. And so I needed the rules, and so I sat down and created the rules. The rules will be available to all Patreons, link down below, at the end of January. And so you can download those and you can use them as you will. And I've made some stuff that goes with that, but more on that later on in the video. The best way to handle a fleet battle that's not going to take you forever to run is to turn the fleet battle into an opposed extended task for either fleet. Huh? What do I mean by this? Each fleet gets an extended track which has to be reduced by the enemy fleet. So whichever fleet reduces the extended track of the opposing fleet is the winner. Fairly straightforward. So how do we turn a fleet into an extended track? We need things like difficulty numbers, resistance, impact. Where is all of that coming from? How are we calculating that? And how are we taking into consideration orders that are given by each of the captains, and dice rolling, and shields, and rerouting power and restoring? Calm yourself, as the Vulcans might say. The first thing that we need to establish for each of the fleets is the difficulty number for that fleet. Now, that is the difficulty number that the opposing fleet will be attempting to achieve or beat in order to have impact on the opposing fleet's extended track. The difficulty number is based on the number of ships involved in the fleet. If you have only a few ships, it's really difficult to hit those ships. If you have 150 ships attacking just 3 ships, hitting those 3 ships is going to be more difficult for the 150 ships than it is for the 3 ships to hit the 150. So the bigger the fleet, the lower the difficulty number is in order to hit that fleet. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. So I created a table which allows you to compare and go, well, if you've got 5 ships, your difficulty is 3. If you've got 500 ships, your difficulty is 0. So we established the difficulty straight up off the bat. That's the easy part. Then we get into the slightly more complicated part, but it's not overly complicated. You then take the scale of every single ship involved in that fleet. There are various scales. Some of the bigger ships, some of the smaller ships, doesn't matter. You take all of those scales, you add them together to get one giant number, and then you divide it by the number of ships in the fleet. In other words, you are getting the average scale for the fleet. Most of the time, this is going to sit around 4 or 5, somewhere around there. Now, this average scale, I call your fleet impact value. So that is the impact that your fleet will have if they successfully defeat the difficulty number of the opposing fleet. So who gets to make the roll to see if the fleet actually succeeds at overcoming the difficulty to then have this impact? Well, what attribute and department is being used? Under normal circumstances, it would be the admiral or the fleet captain who is responsible, and so the burden should fall on their shoulders. However, that is... it's okay, but it's not as inclusive as it could be. What I propose is that because a fleet battle is not just who can shoot the best, but also who can position themselves the best, who can take advantage of shield rotations, and who can repair their ship faster. My proposal is that you cycle through each of the different player characters around the table, and they get to choose the attribute and the department that they feel is most appropriate to the fleet engagement. Now, most of the time, it will be control plus security, or it will be insight plus command, or presence plus command. But it could also be daring plus medicine when the doctor is making a roll, because that's the triage that is happening on all of the ships. The better the triage, the more efficient the crew are in terms of maintaining their battle readiness state. So this is really about the players being able to make some cool rolls, regardless of what position they hold on the ship. As far as the opposition fleet is concerned, that's where you are rolling, and you use the standard NPC ship rules there. You decide on, is the quality of the enemy crew good, average, exceptional, etc., etc. You don't care about what the departments are or the attributes. Those numbers get added together and you get your successes. So that is how you then determine whether your impact actually takes place. To calculate the resistance that a fleet has, you take the fleet impact value and you divide it by 3. Where does this magical number 3 come from? To be perfectly honest with you, it was a decision that I took to create a universal constant, divide by 3, and it gives you a very good range of numbers for resistance, regardless of how many ships are involved. Remember, this whole thing is about simplifying starship combat on a fleet scale. So by dividing it by 3, if your scale is 5, divide by 3, and then you round accordingly, down or up, depending on where the point decimal sits. That gives you your resistance for your fleet. So now you have the difficulty number, you have the impact that the enemies will be having upon that, and then you have the resistance that will reduce that impact. And there you have the extended task for the fleet and for the opposing fleet. One roll each round allows you to keep that fleet battle going, keep it dynamic, keep it cool, keep it fun, and to move forward, allowing you to focus on the PCs on their ship having their one-on-one with whatever enemy it is that they are looking for. But how do we calculate how many steps there are on the extended track? Well, remember that universal constant of 3? You're now going to take the fleet impact value, the average scale of all of the ships, and you're now going to multiply it by 3. So that might give you a value of 12, 15, 18, or more. That is the extended track for that particular fleet. When that track reaches 0, the fleet has been completely destroyed. This means that at your breakthrough point, so halfway at the track and then halfway again, at halfway, the commander of that fleet should be making some serious decisions as to whether they commit to the rest of this battle or whether they leave. And this really depends entirely on the species at play. Klingons generally don't want to avoid combat unless there is a very passionate Klingon talking about, we are withdrawing to a better tactical position. It is not surrender. We're not running away. Fight another day is more honorable than dying in a silly cause type of thing, making up an excuse as to why we can leave this battle. The Jem'Hadar don't have the choice. The Borg do not have the choice. There is no retreat for either of those two. So think about it from that perspective. But at each breakthrough point, the resistance values, the impact values, they don't change. It is the commander's position on this battle that should be changing. Starfleet should pull out at the first breakthrough unless this is an absolutely life or death situation, in which case at the second breakthrough, I believe that Starfleet would pull out. There is no ways they will sacrifice their entire fleet for a specific cause. So those modifiers that I was talking about, well, they're going to have such a thing as fleet traits. And these traits represent differences in different fleets. The odds, for example, if you are at a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 odds, there are more ships on that fleet than there are on us. There are calculations that happen. The difficulty number and the impact numbers, they change. I'm not going to go into those, it would take too long, but there are some modifiers that happen if the odds are for or against the fleet. Taking a fleet into an ambush, flying the fleet into a nebula and discovering that there's an enemy fleet in there. It's going to change up the numbers for both of the fleets. Having cloaked ships is going to change up the numbers for both fleets. Having a secret weapon. Doesn't really matter what the secret weapon is, but for example, the Breen energy dampening weapons which disabled ships, that was a surprise for the Federation, and it gave the Breen a significant advantage for that entire battle. Giving the PCs a reward for knowing the area in which the battle is going to take place by scanning space and creating the known space trait is a really good way of encouraging PCs from just forming a fleet and going in gung-ho. scan the space, learn a little bit. It's going to help you. It's going to improve your impact values. The alternative is an unstable space area. This area is you're fighting in the Badlands. You are fighting in fractured space. Both fleets are going to have penalties to that unless one of the fleets has already done their due diligence and has figured out exactly how to avoid these things. This allows you to have engagements where, say, for example, the Marquis with a cluster of very small ships might actually be able to take on 3 Cardassian Galor ships and actually get away with it. Now, to make the battle dynamic and not just rest on your shoulders as the GM, I have also linked to the extended task. Every 2 increments that extended task is decreased by, there is a random table that you roll on. And that random table determines what happens to the fleet. In extreme circumstances, a ship is destroyed. It blows up. So you have that dramatic moment of, we've just lost the Hathaway, sir. That's the extreme range. Most of the time, it'll just be the battle is going on and that shields are down to 30%, 70%. Most of the fleet's reporting they're still intact. We're still looking good. This random table is really for you as the GM to describe narratively what's happening around. The PC's ship, by the way, is never going to be destroyed on a random roll. There is part of the table where the PC's ship takes a breach, and that's simply because of being hit multiple times from different directions and all that sort of thing. To make the player characters feel more involved, unless they are just one little ship in a bigger fleet and there's a fleet admiral going on, the player characters need to be able to change the course of the fleet battle. It's the bottom line. They are always the heroes. They are the ones that are going to make a difference in one shape, form, or another. So the way that takes place in mass fleet battles is by the PCs issuing one order, which does not count towards their normal actions for the round. That one order can be decided upon as a group collective. It can be the captain. It can be whomever does it. That one order is given to the entire fleet. And I've got quite a few orders. I think I've got about 8 or 9 orders that I've come up with. And they range from things like do a direct attack on the center of the line, increases your impact, but reduces your difficulty to be hit. You're focusing on a single point. The enemy can all focus on you as well. So that's direct assault. You can do fighter screens. You can do defensive formations. You can do reroute power formation. So you're not actually increasing your impact, but you are perhaps restoring some steps to your extended track. There are lots of different orders that can be given. Each one has its own impact, narratively speaking and mechanically, on the game as it plays out. So the PCs can really make those decisions and make it feel as if they are really contributing to mass fleet battles. And so that is how it works. So if you want a demonstration of how mass fleet battles work, let me know in the comments down below, and I will do a sample play of a mass fleet battle taking place. I will do all of the graphics and all of the things to show you exactly how it works. The rule set that I have put together, again, available to all of my Patreons for January, does include an extensive example of building the 2 fleets and running the game and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to go into that because that's literally an entire video on its own right. Next week, unless you want the demonstration of the mass fleet battles, we are going to be looking at the role of the first officer. Yes, what does the first officer actually do? I'm looking at you, Jacote. And until next week, I wish you and yours long life and happy gaming.